Thank you all for coming, and my name is Paul Cinelli, and I am honored to introduce Jim Babchick, who is a 26-year veteran of the cable television business, and I think it's 11 years with the A&E now. And Jim has been so instrumental working closely with the association and putting together fantastic panels like this. But he's also always available for any insight and guidance that we're looking for. And it's my honor and privilege to introduce Jim.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Blue Ribbon Panel. As you know, this is our state of the industry and an opportunity to get the best and the brightest up on stage and have Bruce take us through the process. I did want to take a second to say to Paul, thank you so much for your leadership at NECTA. A giant hats off to you and the gang, Carolyn and Tim, for doing such a great job, and another great NECTA. Thank you. I also just wanted to take a quick second. I'm able to do the work with the NECTA Planning Committee because of my bosses, Jane Rice, who's up on the stage, and Sarah Hinsman, so thank you guys for the support on that. Anyway, we're excited to be here. As you know, it is a lively panel year over year, and that's because of Bruce Leitzman. Bruce really needs no introduction. I think everyone is familiar with Bruce. He is the principal and founder of Leitzman Research. He is quoted constantly in the New York Times, the Daily News, the Wall Street Journal, multi-channel news. He's the go-to guy for opinions, for research. We are blessed year over year to have him. Bruce will introduce the panel and kick things off. So ladies and gentlemen, Bruce Leitzman.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. Also a lot of familiar faces on the stage. 4 out of the 5 of you were on the panel last year. So many of you who've been with us before, I often end with the question about what do we expect in the future. So I know what you all said, and I'm going to remind you of that. So I know at the last question it's going to take 0 minutes, right? Because nobody's going to say anything anymore. But we have the ability to kind of look back, and James, you weren't here last year, but you were here 2 years ago, so you're a veteran of this panel as well. I just want to, there's been a lot of changes over the last year in the industry as this industry continues to evolve. On the broadband front, there are now more broadband subscribers in America than there are pay TV subscribers. That happened in the first quarter of this year. There are now more broadband subscribers in America than pay TV. And as far as pay TV is concerned, we hear a lot of this idea of cord cutting. But I don't know if everyone in this room knows that 2016 was the best year for the cable industry since 2006. So when we hear this concept of cord cutting, it's not necessarily universal across the industry, and it may be a little exaggerated as well, and we'll get to that. I am going to, so Jane sat next to me last year, and she thought she'd have to go first if she sat next to me this year. But you know what? I'm going to go to Kevin. So Kevin sits farthest away every year, but I'm going to get you this year. Is that your truck out front, Kevin?
That is, yes, it's our Mad Max truck. So it's, that's how we run over Verizon Fios.
So Kevin is the president of the Northeast Division of Comcast. Tell us a little bit about the Northeast Division. One thing I will acknowledge as well is, I mentioned before, 2016, the best year for cable since 2006, and one of the reasons was Comcast. You have actually had net video gains over the past year. In this world of cord cutting, you've had net video gains.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the world is evolving, and I think we've really focused on customer experience, product innovation, and it resonated in the marketplace. And 2016, you'd probably have 20 or 30 over-the-top players. You got a lot of choice out there from a consumer perspective, and I think we just executed well, and my hope is that we continue to do that into the future. Because we have, regardless of, when you talk about pay TV or over the top, and even in your report now, you got DirecTV Now and Sling TV as a alternative, but you can track the subscribers, and who knows how many other players there are, but there is a boatload of content on the internet for consumers to access, that much of it free. So this array of choice, our job is to make sure people want to consume this content, and our job is to figure out how to make it attractive to draw consumers to come to us. And from a video perspective, our X1 platform has really emerged into that kind of capability. We're combining internet as well as traditional pay TV on kind of a unified platform, and if you can present it in an elegant way that consumers perceive value, it's a great proposition. And I think that's one of the things also that's resonated in the market as we think about 2016.
And when we spoke last year, you said, what to look for over the next year, and you basically said one word, and it was mobile. So that's come to a little more fruition than a year ago.
Yeah, we are in the mobile business. Xfinity Mobile is available across the United States, all of our footprint now, and it is, from my perspective, one of the biggest product launches probably for us in present day since the broadband business, because think about if anyone's in your home, you're connecting to what's important to you, not over wire, but over wireless infrastructure. And we've been at this for 10 years with Wi-Fi, and now to bring 4G, LTE combined with Wi-Fi to bring wire mobility, both in terms of voice and ultimately content, is going to be a very compelling business.
And we'll probably talk more about that as the panel goes along. Next on the panel is Jane Rice. Jane is the SVP of Distribution for A&E Networks. Jane, tell us about the progress, where you stand in the progress over the past year for A&E.
Yeah, so we've had a wonderful year at A&E. I think one of the big announcements that we made earlier this year is the National Women's Soccer League. And so that you can see now on Lifetime on Saturdays. We, Bruce, really are in the business of storytelling. And I think that's our core competency, but we're also looking at content complements that help our core businesses. And we have a business strategy team that actually looked at the NWSL and looks at other opportunities to really augment our core businesses. And I think that's one of the things that some of the best companies are doing right now. They used to say content is king. And I think just as much as content is king, I think that the players that'll do best in this ecosystem moving forward are ones that find competencies that match their core strengths.
And when we spoke last year, you talked about the breadth of your content, but you also talked about getting on new competitive platforms. In the past year, we've seen, and Kevin mentioned it, DirecTV Now, we've seen Hulu with live TV, YouTube TV, Fubo. These are all competitors. But to you, they're not a competitor. To you, they're new platforms. So,
Right.
So how do you fit in getting part of these new platforms, but also continuing the relationships with the traditional providers?
Sure. So, I think that we're platform agnostic, and, we want to see our content everywhere. I think what maybe I also said last year is that some of these new MVPDs, over-the-top providers, would get some market share, but I don't think they'll see a tremendous market share. And I think that's true today. We haven't seen huge numbers. I think that the ecosystem as it stands today with the MVPDs is really one that we're all vested in. And I think that, Kevin's talking about, mobile, and those are great opportunities for us when you look at the technologies that our traditional MVPD partners are rolling out. That gives us a lot of opportunity to get our content out there, whether it's short form content. We have a digital studio, 45th and Dean, and we're doing a lot with Comcast as it is right now with Watchables and our other partners. And so, look, I think that we want to be where these new guys are. We're very fortunate in that as a general entertainment company, we cover men, women, and millennials. And so when you look at our portfolio vis-a-vis a Discovery or a Scripps, I think it's, pretty compelling offering that we have. And, we're seeing that because all of these providers to the great extent, have launched us.
Thank you, Jane. Tom Adams is the Executive Vice President of Field Operations for Charter Communications. Now, last year when you were here, the deal had just gone through in May, so you've had a busy year. You've had a busy conference. I believe it's your second panel, right?
Yes, this is my second panel, and yeah, we have a year under our belt now since close, and we've accomplished a lot in that year, and most notably, you know, from a field ops perspective, we've set up 11 operating regions with 36 management areas reporting up to those 11 regions that all report to me. It's about 35,000 employees that I get a headache over every day, but that is all done. And the other thing we did that I think is very notable is we rolled out what we call spectrum pricing and packaging, both in the residential environment and in the small business environment across the now entire combined footprint. And so, you know, what that means to consumers is you now have a standard offering based on the Charter playbook that we executed back in a much smaller company we refer to as Legacy Charter, and yielded us a lot of success. It's now rolled out in this new larger company, and we expect that same success. So we're very happy with where we are. We still have another 12 months of integration efforts. You know, the things that are yet to be completed, billing systems, and those who involved in billing systems, you know the challenges there. Even though you have 2 different brands of billing systems, you have 50 different instances, and a different instance is like a different billing system. And it really becomes a hurdle to a standardized product offering. And so we need to get those instances down to 2. And then attached to that is provisioning. So provisioning of all the devices that we use, whether it be modems, routers, or set-top boxes. We need to standardize that provisioning engine so that it links to these now 2 instances of billing system and all operates the same efficient way. So those are some of the key points of what we've accomplished and yet to be accomplished.
And those were some of the challenges you mentioned last year. And when we look at your numbers, and Tom Rutledge mentioned this in the earnings call, it's been a little bit more of a challenge on the Time Warner systems. Your Legacy Charter systems are actually also net video positive over the past year. Talk about the challenge of integration. I think Mr. Rutledge talked about the many different offers that Time Warner used to have, and how do you change that format to the new Spectrum format?
You know, that is the issue, and so Time Warner had a more regionalized operating strategy, and they had different offers and in the marketplace, very aggressive retention, and so you had this multitude of offers out there that when you put them, it created an encyclopedia to get our arms around that consumers had, and they were both introductory offers to bring new business in, they were retention offers, and we tried to bucketize them and say, you know, as these expire, or as a customer signs up for the new Spectrum pricing and packaging, those offers get sunset. And so we try and do it on the increment rather than a wholesale change. And as people, I know nobody's ever heard of this tactic, but customers call up and threaten to disconnect if we don't give them a rate that they want, right?
Shut the video down.
Yes, and so, you know, we've held the line on that. And so until you change the marketplace or re-educate the marketplace, that's no longer an acceptable practice, you're going to see a slight dip in your video growth. And we saw that at Legacy Charter. We're seeing it now in Legacy Time Warner, but that will change, and we're already starting to change that culture, and we'll see that go back the other way. I'm confident of that.
Next on the panel is James Brown. James is the SVP of Content Distribution for Revolt. James, you weren't with us last year, but it's good to see you again. Tell us, update us on Revolt and what's happening there.
Good thing is we continue to grow. I think my prediction 2 years ago was 50 million homes. We're not there yet. But we've also taking a good look at the international marketplace. If you know music, music is something that connects people, period, and it is very diverse in nature. And so what we've found is that it is helping us to actually get distribution internationally. So earlier this year, we launched in 5 countries on the continent of Africa. You'll see 17 countries launching on the continent before the end of the year. We're working on some deals in the UK, France, Portugal, Israel, even the Middle East, which is kind of interesting for a business called Revolt. But at the same time, Revolt is about music, and we are about making sure that we are on all the right platforms for this millennial audience that we are chasing and serving. And we're trying to make sure that we're providing the content that they want to see it, short form, long form, and making sure, again, that we are on all the platforms. We are still in the stage of brand awareness. There's still a lot of folks who don't understand or know what we actually do. So you see us on Instagram. You see us on Facebook Live. Wednesday night, we did live stream of a concert of the freshman class is what it's called. It's all about hip hop and who is going to be the next hot person, who's going to be the next Drake. And we did that live, and we did it on a stream. But we do it on a stream because we can reach more consumers and build that brand awareness and hopefully drive them back to the linear network that's on the distribution platforms that we continuously support.
How long does that cycle continue where awareness is the main motivator?
You know, the way that I see it, we'll be 4 years old in October. We probably have another 2 to 4 years to continually do that. And part of that is just there's just so much content out there. There's so much music out there, and you have to figure out ways to do the breakthrough. And sometimes, for us anyway, we have a strategy where we're also trying to figure out how we touch our consumer a little bit more. So you'll see us on college campuses a little bit more as we come up into the next season. The music conference is another way that we do it. We've had that for 4 years. Last year we had over 30 entertainers performing there. It is our way to touch the folks who are the true music influencers. So you'll see us doing various strategies that continue to kind of bring us in the forefront. And we'll use our chairman a lot more. You'll see Puff or Diddy or Sean Combs, whichever you know him by, you'll see him out a little bit more visible in the Revolt space. I'm sure if you saw him on the cover of Forbes, and he's, I'm going to hopefully bring him to MIPCOM, and he's going to do the keynote there. So you'll continue to see him a little bit more out there as we begin to have conversations about the influence of the millennial audience and the millennial consumer and the Gen Z audience. Hopefully you all saw Jake Katz, who is our head of audience insights, earlier this week here moderating a panel. We believe that we are one of those companies that truly understand that audience, and hopefully we're helping our distribution partners to connect to that audience.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least on the panel is Paul Cronin. Paul is the SVP of Field Operations and Customer Experience for Cox Communications. And Paul, you're a native New Englander, right? Living in Atlanta. So Patriots or Falcons?
Not even a question. Falcons are wannabes, but it made for an interesting February. The office was all decorated, and Arthur Blank sat on our board for a number of years. So the office was all decked out with Rise Up, and I just walked through every day with a little smile, and it was great. They came back the next day after the Super Bowl, and the place was dead quiet, so it was pretty good.
You were rising up at the time, though,
Yeah.
I believe. So talk to us about Cox and your role there and where your company stands at this point.
Yeah, obviously my role is field operations, so all the different regions and the people that run those regions report into me. So keenly interested in how the business operates every day and making sure we're delivering on our promises, particularly in the area of customer experience and making sure we're fulfilling our promise there. I think the business is doing well, and while we're publicly, we're not publicly traded, we're privately held, so we don't share our numbers. We have seen a turn in the business to the good, and so we, like Kevin and others, are very optimistic about the video business. Has not gone away. It's still a very good and vibrant business. It's changing, but we're experiencing a lot of what the other companies in our sector are experiencing, and we're not for sale.
But Paul, they always say you're not for sale, but if there's an offer, you listen, right?
Well,
that's not your job to
yeah,
listen.
that's certainly not my job. It's not my money. But we've been around 119 years as a tightly controlled family business, and they believe in diversification. They believe greatly in the broadband business. It is a good business, as others on this panel would tell you, and they have no interest in getting out. And while there's a lot of rumors that always speculate and position that others would like to take us, and it's flattering to always want to be acquired, but the family has no interest in selling, and they're pretty emphatic about that.
This meeting in general is about the focus on customer experience, and that's in your title. Mm-hmm. And last year you said that one of the goals is to stay laser focused on customer experience. So what does that mean to you, and what has that meant for your employees and your customers over the past year?
Yeah, I think for us it's always been about sharing with the employees and really being vocal about this is a core value of the company, and it's something that we see as the key differentiator in the marketplace. And Cox has always had a terrific legacy going back to Jim Robbins around the importance of customer service and the importance of customer experience. And I think we've kept that drumbeat with our employees. And the challenge is to make sure you back it up with your actions, with your employees. And I think we've managed to do that. And we continue to improve in that space. We measure 14 very active customer experience channels, and 11 or 12 of those channels have material improvements year over year. So to us, it remains a key priority, and we're making progress. And I think supplementing it with the relationship we have with Comcast on the video product and other things, it's been a pretty powerful combination, because you can't win on just product, you can't win on just price. You got to have everything. But I think at the end of the day, to me, the service experience kind of outweighs the others, and that's really where we need to be focused and differentiating.
You mentioned 14 measures.
Yeah.
Are there 3 that are above the others?
I say measures, I meant channels that
Okay.
we measure, where we interact and how we deliver our service experience. We measure across all those spectrums. So.
Got it. Kevin, you talked about the experience in NX1. What else fits into the customer experience as you look at it?
So I'm sure I think you've rolled out NPS, right,
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
And Tom. So Net Promoter System is not just industry, our competitors and what companies consumers every day do business with. So we've aligned around Net Promoter System. We're in the tail end of launching that across our organization. It's transforming the sort of customer experience focus for our every employee in the company, including the executives in the company. And I think Paul was right on. This isn't just about value without trying to create a value proposition without an astonishingly good experience when a customer needs to interact with us. You can't win. And I think our future hangs in the balance of being able to execute and achieve that aspiration. And we're doing an awful lot. There's technological tools, but there's a heck of a lot of it is motivational, and it's in the hands of the people who serve customers every single day. And so that's been a huge focus at our company. And again, I think you sort of look in the rearview mirror and say that absolutely had something to do with the success that we're seeing.
How much of a challenge is customer expectations? Because you are the number 1 cable company, the number 2 pay TV provider in America, the number 1 broadband company. Sometimes big is not thought of as inviting to customers. So how do you deal with those clenched fists that some customers may have?
4 out of 5 dentists recommend whatever the toothpaste is. Look, you can get caught up in that stuff, you know, and I would tell you, people I work with who may be sitting in this room, we think about every customer interaction. That's in the DNA of our business. We don't get caught up in, you know, 20-something million customers. It's all about one customer at a time, one interaction at a time. If you sweat the small stuff, if you stop sweating about the small stuff, that's when you're in trouble. So for us, that's really, I think, what you have to remain entrepreneurial. You have to know that, look, we just talked about, well, customers have more alternatives. It has to make us a better business to compete in a world that continues to evolve and change. And if we stick our head in the sand, we won't be relevant a year from now or 2 years from now, whatever the number is. And so I think that's the culture we've tried and continuously try to create each and every day, is just to remain what the roots of this industry, when this thing started, if we can hang on to that and continue to innovate and improve, and innovate doesn't just mean technology, it means around customer experience and service and other attributes. That to me is the holy grail.
And Tom, how do you deal with that experience as you're going through a consumer name change, as the product is being called Spectrum? How do you maintain that experience across the customer base?
Well, a lot of similarities to what Kevin said, and I think it starts with a high-value product priced right, and that was the cornerstone of Spectrum pricing and packaging. And as an example, we offer a entry-level tier. Our base tier is 60 meg in 50% of our markets and 100 meg in the other half. And so what that means is we don't have a 5 meg, a 10 meg, a 20 meg tier that is confusing to the marketplace. And a lot of people would buy a 5 meg tier because of a price point, but then they'd be unhappy with the performance of it. And so we made the conscious decision to say that we're going to offer no less than 60 meg on the increment going forward. So I think it starts there. And then, as Kevin indicated, you have to capitalize on every transaction that you have with a customer, whether it be adding services or a new customer or a trouble call if that occurs. And you have to measure that. And so we do that, and it's interesting, the NPS scores, overall, in other words, if you go out and survey a percentage of our entire customer base, you'll come up with some pretty low numbers. But if you measure the customers that had a recent transaction, it's 10x better. And so that means that we're executing well and achieving our objective in that space. And then the other thing I'd add is that to do that requires a lot of work. As Kevin says, you got to really get down into the details. And one of the things that we believe is that if you have your own employees answering the phone, well-trained, same thing with technicians, don't outsource or offshore your phone calls, have limited contractors doing installations, have more company employees and trucks, that you'll have a better customer experience. And we're investing in that. And over the next few years, we're going to hire 20,000 incremental charter employees to achieve that objective. So we're investing in it, and we expect to achieve high results, which will hopefully mean a better product for the consumer.
I've addressed customer experience from the provider side. What about from the content side? So Jane, when you think about the customer experience, what are you thinking?
I think that right now we're very focused on data, and we have some data relationships with several of our MVPD partners, and those are becoming increasingly more important as we look at what our customers want to see from us. And it's been very helpful. It's so helpful that it is impacting how we actually are producing content, so that when we're actually filming content, we're looking at ways to provide content that resonates for those MVPD partners. And then I think secondarily, we are focused on storytelling, but we have very strong brands, and we've hired some editors-in-chief to make sure that those brands are resonating across multiple platforms, and that we're reaching those consumers in the mediums that they view our content in, and we're providing the types of content that they want to see, whether that be short form, whether that be editorial content, and we're trying to have a point of view that resonates with our brands.
And you mentioned data. Does data fit into that?
Yes.
So you're researching these customers too?
And it's interesting, like simple things like, look, we launched Viceland just over a year ago, and very much like Revolt for JB, we know that brand resonates for millennials. But what we didn't know is that it over-indexes as much as 20% for Hispanics. So in knowing that, it makes it a sort of compelling proposition, not only for MVPD partners to put that on their Hispanic packages, but it also helps in terms of how Vice is looking at creating their content. So, we think that data is very important going forward.
James, you talked about the customer experience a little bit before, and I think your messaging talks about being online, on demand, and on the air. But how do you think about the customer experience?
Very similar to what Jane just actually said. We're curating. We are trying to make sure that we are providing the content in the best ways that we can, and as far as short form and long form, and making sure that we are on all these various platforms also. And so, this audience, this multicultural, multi-diverse audience is one that we try and find the common ground for too. So that this music connects, but we're also finding that there also are large sports fans. So we make sure that we try and add some content that's sports-wise. So this week you'll see us with ESPN. We are actually producing part of the music pieces for the X Games. And you'll see that produced on ABC. It is Revolt, and we've done that for this will be our third year with them doing that, with us doing that with them. And you'll see more music and sports mixes and with ESPN, and we're looking for ways to make sure that we are part of those audiences, because we also understand, like the millennial audience is all about music, sports, fashion, art, and we try and make sure that we have the right mix of that type of content on our various platforms.
I'm going to transition into another area, but I just want to give you a little update. I will, if there's any questions for the audience, I will take them in a couple minutes. And also, we're going to go to about 10 past, because Paul has to go to a meeting. No, I'm kidding. We started a little late, so we're just going to run a little late. Hopefully, you're not going to miss your checkout time if you're staying here. But I would be remiss if I didn't bring up some of the things that were addressed in the prior panel by Senator Whitehouse. And Paul, in last year, you said we need to figure out the regulatory environment. That was one of the big keys that was going to happen over the next year. A lot has changed in that world, but what does that mean? What does that mean to you now?
Well, we certainly feel a lot better about the relook at net neutrality, because I just don't think there was any indication on the part of the industry that we were trying to do anything but the right thing in terms of access for our consumers. And so, we felt that net neutrality, and particularly the Title II classification, was just heavy-handed, and I don't think it necessarily reflected where our industry was or our behaviors to that point were. So I think there's a lot of optimism around Title II. Certainly this past April, looking at the privacy provisions, and I think Chairman Pai's view of that in terms of the FCC versus FTC, I think that is another good decision and another good direction that this is going. So I think from our perspective, there's a lot of optimism around the new commissioner and how he sees the business and how he feels about the business. And wanting to keep us investing and growing. I mean, this business is, and our country's in a great place because of the investment that was made by a lot of private companies in terms of building this infrastructure. And I think we just want to be really careful not to regulate to the point where that is no longer attractive for companies to do that and keep the ball moving. So we feel very optimistic around the new chairman, and I think he shares a similar kind of view of that. And very encouraged that there's going to be continued capital investment in this business. I mean, I look at our business and what we're going to invest over the next 5 years in our network infrastructure to make sure that gig speeds are universally available and other things. That's all positive for consumers, and I don't think you ever want to stifle that investment or growth.
This week was Net Neutrality Week, and there was a lot of impetus to get consumers to write in and talk about net neutrality. And you guys are not necessarily considered the good guys in this format. The senator talked about the worry of gatekeepers and toll chargers. Kevin, Comcast has been public in the position on net neutrality, but can you expand on that for the audience and to some degree, for somebody who is a consumer and says, wait a minute, it's that big cable company who's the winner here. What can you say that dispels that notion?
Well, for those in the audience that aren't aware of this, we've been operating under net neutrality as part of the consent decree when we acquired NBC. So since 2012, we have already been under a net neutrality regimen and have operated perfectly fine. And so I think the big thing, building on what Paul said, this whole categorization, Title II, is a outdated, consumers do not understand Title II, all they understand is free and open internet. And we are 150% behind that, no throttling, no. Title II is the real bear, and it would certainly have an impact on investment and innovation. And that's why we like, I think ultimately, though, the solution can't be a regulatory agency. It's got to be, Congress has to get involved, and the challenge is, can anything get done? And because I think that's when you'll see more certainty, and companies like the three of ours here, in terms of looking at investment and opportunity, will come when Congress really gets involved in a way that codifies, I think, what the agency is moving towards. But I think that's the work ahead.
And not to get too caught up on it, but how can you simply differentiate, in layman's terms, the difference between net neutrality and Title II? Because you said net neutrality, we're part of that. Yeah. Title II, no.
Yeah, so
help us out with that.
Yeah, so Title II essentially regulates our broadband business like when the telephone company was a monopoly. And so when you think about those incremental regulations, it has all kinds of impacts on how you put products together. As an example, it has barriers to, I'll give you one example, it has impacts on internet platforms we might be able to put on to our X1 platform because it's delivered over a different or displayed and delivered over a different technology. So if consumers want to see the ultimate in innovation, you got to take that off the board, and until you deal with the Title II issue, you're going to have the haves, have-nots, constraints, and lack of clarity. And I think that really puts a wrench in innovation that ultimately impacts things that consumers can benefit from.
And Tom, the other major thing that the senator talked about, and it's kind of in the environment, is gathering of personal information. And again, the industry is kind of not seen as the good guy in this. Can you dispel that notion?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. If you think about it, with the relaxation of the privacy rules, tomatoes got thrown at the cable industry. And we've been living by privacy rules for a long time, and we still live by privacy rules. Now, there's other companies out there that I won't mention that start with a G that don't and still do not live by those privacy rules and use that information for profit. And so, you know, my message, and I vowed I wouldn't get into a political discussion, here I am, but my message is, you know, wherever we end up, it should be fair to all players. And I